Thank you very much, Matt, and welcome to the audience. I hope you find this webinar very informative. And we're going to start off talking about the threat landscape. So firstly, I just want to picture yourself at this, very idyllic tropical paradise. And this is essentially how business owners envision their businesses on the internet. So essentially, any resource you request, whether it's a file, whether it's data, money transferred, everything just goes smoothly. It just works perfectly. And your users, when they're actually authenticating, that entire process occurs without any hiccups. But the reality is that it's very much akin to natural disasters. Every time your employees or your customers are on the internet, they're being targeted by threat actors. And as you can see from the picture here, these types of threats come in very different forms with different levels of ferocity, intensity, as well as the aftermath or the consequence. Um, so, how at risk is your business? Okay, so there are a few organizations doing very good work in bringing awareness around the threat landscape. One such organization is the National Cyber Resilience Centre Group in the UK, which has 6 regional offices. We also have the National Cybersecurity Centre, which is part of the GCHQ. And in Ireland, we have the National Cybersecurity Centre. Now, um, some of the reporting is quite damning to say with respect to cybersecurity threats. And here's just a graphic provided from the reporting by the Cyber Resilience Centre. So top right, as you can see, cybercrime costs the UK billions of pounds every year. And also too, from a supply chain perspective, the threats through that particular vector are pretty high. So fewer than 1 in 10 businesses actually actively monitor for those types of risks. Bottom left, although most organizations have some form of digital exposure, only less than 20% actually have a formal incident management plan. And the one that's the most scary for me, I guess, bottom right, 2022, 40% roughly of UK businesses were a target of cyber attack, where the majority of those were actually phishing attempts. And so what if the threat actors are successful? What does that look like? So we've got a few examples here, as you can see on the screen. So T-Mobile, as you can see, that breach affected 37 million customers. We had the LastPass breach from last year. Early this year in January, the Royal Mail was actually targeted by a Russian ransomware group, and that put that particular entity's operations down for 3 to 4 weeks. And also in the US, as you can see, the government of Oakland were actually targeted by a ransom attack in earlier this year, and the city was actually down for close to 2 months. And that's just some of the stories. We also have some more from other areas. So for example, Advance, a supplier to the NHS, was actually hit last year, which actually left some of the NHS trust without access to key software for 2 months. And more recently in this year, we had the 3CX, another massive supply chain attack, where the bad actors are able to actually use the application to Trojanize a version application. And also, as you can see, in Ireland, the health service was actually hit by a ransomware attack where the costs were expected to rise to over 100 million euros. And so if I asked anyone in the audience, what are some of the typical risks to your business in general? I'm pretty sure without hesitation, you'd be able to, mention most, if not all, of the terms or examples on the screen. But if I pivot towards, excuse me, cyber threats, how many in the audience have heard of all 10 of these cyber threats? How many are aware of at least a half? How about 3? The key question here is, if you don't know the threats out there, how do you know what is valuable to your business? What's the impact of losing that data or access to your systems, or even how to protect it? And so if we understand the scale of the threat, then we understand where the threats are coming from. And essentially, most of those threats originate from one of 2 places. The first is hostile nation states, And the threat essentially is targeted towards critical national infrastructure. That includes, as you can see, healthcare, public sector, energy, finance, transport. And these attacks against these industries are politically motivated and they're designed to cripple a nation state. So if you're anywhere within that supply chain or you operate within those critical national infrastructure sectors, you are a prime target. And the danger of this is that, as per Gartner's predictions, by 2025, they anticipate that the threat actors will actually be able to weaponize operational technology environments to actually cause human casualties. And we kind of had a precursor to this in Florida a couple of years back, where at the Oldsmar water treatment plant, a hacker was able to use the username and password for a former employee's TeamViewer account. After logging in, they were able to raise the level of lye in the drinking water to poisonous levels. So this is very serious stuff that we're dealing with. And that brings us to the second source of threats, and the one that is statistically a far bigger concern for the SMB space, which would be financially motivated attacks. So the threat actors don't only just work for hostile nation states, they are also a large number of independent organizations and individuals targeting everyone from small to large businesses. And their motivation is simple. It's money. Okay. So ransomware, business even compromise, they are the largest examples of threats targeting financial gain. And studies suggest that about 70% of ransomware attacks actually target the SMB space. So let's speak a bit about ransomware as a service. So I want you to understand, stress upon you that we have to think of these entities as businesses. The same way that you're concerned within your business with bottom line, efficiency, innovation, customer service, for example, these organizations think the same way. And so essentially ransomware as a service has kind of the pyramid structure where you just need a small number of really clever ransomware developers. What they will do is they would actually go out and recruit affiliates. And with those affiliates, they would provide all the training, all the content, all the knowledge, whatever they need to be able to go and cast that net to as many unsuspecting victims as possible. And just underscore exactly what I'm talking about in terms of a business. Here are just some of the common ransomware as a service revenue models. Flat, flat fee, there's an affiliate program, just pure profit are some examples. But also too, they also offer bug bounty incentives or programs. So essentially what they're doing is they are going to reward or incentivize individuals for finding weaknesses within their systems, whether it's the browser they use, for example, the locking software for encrypting files, and they also with respect to the applications that they use, trying to find security vulnerabilities. They're also offering doxing incentives where they can pay up to, I think is up to like $1 million in Bitcoin for anyone who's successfully able to dox the gang leader, if that makes sense. So now, where does all this happen? It happens in a dark place of the internet called the dark web. And essentially, there's a massive credentials market available on the dark web, very much akin to the likes of, eBay, that structure that you'd find on the surface web. And essentially, it's very easy to get to the dark web. You just need to have the right browser. As you can see, a Tor browser. Within a few minutes, you will have access to lots of nefarious stuff. And here's just some examples of what that looks like. So for example, you can see here that stolen credentials and initial access, so that actual foothold into your network, is being sold on the dark web. And essentially, anything you want. You've got phishing as a service. So Evil Proxy, we only saw this being reported in September, is actually able to get past MFA, which is quite scary. Some other things that you can probably get from the dark web. Do you want UK passports? Fine, go ahead, off you go. If you're into, legal weapons, for example, you've got that there as well too. And also too, if you need to get credit cards, fresh CVV sniffed 100% valid, and just take a look at the prices. That just gives you an understanding of how easy it is to actually get your hands on this information to be able to destroy businesses and lives. And so, how are businesses impacted? What's the fallout? So essentially, here's some information, some statistics around attacks. As you can see, the average ransomware dwell time is 23 minutes. Essentially, that represents the time a cyber attacker has free reign within your environment before they're either detected by your systems or they actually deploy that malicious code. So 23 days within your organization, just being able to collect any kind of information they can. So essentially trying to find out how much you can pay and how to leverage that payment from yourself, who are the right people to target. Typically, ransomware will be around 10% of the annual revenue, and that's because they have learned over time that most companies are willing to accept a loss of 10% of annual revenue. Average cost, as you see, 1.4 million per year. And the key thing here about that cost is that the cost of the ransom is only 20% of that. Okay, the vast majority of that is you as a business having to respond to that particular incident. The other key statistic, as you can see, is the average downtime of 21 days. So let's think about that. Think about your business being offline for 21 days and what impact that can have to your business from a financial perspective, but also to a reputational perspective as well. Some other things, as you can see, legislation. Okay, so depending on the industry you're in or who's at fault for that particular breach, you could be facing particularly serious legal fines if you think about GDPR. And also to insurance. So insurance premiums are skyrocketing, and we're seeing that there's a significant impact for those who have not been covered by cyber insurance. And so let's take a quick look at what an insurer's view of cyber risk is. So essentially what the organizations who actually provide cybersecurity insurance are doing is that they're setting a minimum level of security in order to provide that protection and cover to your business. And the reason this has been the case is because they found out over the last couple of years that most of the businesses they're actually paying out to had very poor cybersecurity practices, and they become quite up to the game in terms of saying, hey, at least you need to have these minimum security measures in place to be covered if you do suffer from a breach. So you might be asking yourself, okay, cool. So, what can I do? Where do I start? How do I respond to the threat? So every day we are working to combat this risk, but it moves and it changes over time. So firstly, acknowledging risk is to understand that you cannot remove it, but you should be doing as much as you can to reduce that risk. And what we should focus on is the overall security position of your business or your company. So by doing this, you will start to understand why certain services are being suggested, but also appreciate that if they are right for your business, then you can, you can have those specific risk need. So, but at the bare minimum, ensure that you're following a cybersecurity framework. Make sure that you're implementing minimum acceptable security technology that aligns with whatever compliance, insurance, and regulatory obligations you need to fulfill.